There are shows with psychics.
And there are shows with doctors.
But there's no show like The Psychic and the Doc.
Your practical paranormal power unleashed.
This show synthesizes the talents of world-class medium Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, psychic explorer,
and street smart spiritualist, behavioral psychologist, Dr. Pat Baccili. All subjects are on the table and no topic is taboo. Inspiration, insight,
action, and fun as Mark Anthony connects callers with loved ones in spirit.
In tandem with Dr. Pat's fresh, no-nonsense, street smart, intuitive insights. And she is hilarious.
Extraordinary problems
require extraordinary solutions, which may come from this side
or the other side. This is The Psychic
and the Doc, and it starts now. Welcome, everyone, and happy 4th of July. Also, it's World UFO Day. In 1947, just outside of Roswell, New Mexico, something happened. But 250 years ago in Philadelphia, a nervous Thomas Jefferson stood shaking as he looked down at a document he was asked to draft, and that document was the Declaration of Independence. The theme of this show is the 250-year fight for freedom. Now, freedom means different things to different people, and it was kind of ironic that Jefferson, a slave owner, crafted a document that said all men are created equal. Now, at the time, that meant all landowning, white, wealthy men were created equal, and over the past 2.5 centuries, that has evolved. And we're going to talk a bit about the continuing struggle for women and their equality and their freedom. And I can't think of anyone to talk about this better than my amazing co-host, Dr. Pat Baccili. All right, Dr. Pat.
All right, so I have to pay a compliment to the Supreme Court. Now, you and I have not been happy with the Supreme Court.
No.
Now, we're not political people, but there are just some things that we bring them up when it comes to rights. But the reason I'm a little bit doing a happy dance is because, first of all, I couldn't believe there was actually something floating out there that many, many people don't even know to overturn the Citizenship Act. Now, what am I saying? Like, if you were born in Australia or something, and you had a little bambino, a Mark Anthony the 5th or 6th, I don't know what would happen is, oopsie, you ain't a citizen. Now, I'm honestly breaking it down simplistically. But what happened was the Supreme Court said no. We're not going to overturn that.
Yeah.
And I thought about the impact of that for a minute, just for a minute, because to a lot of people, it's just a law. It's just, it's something, right? But I tried to do the math on the number of people from all sorts of countries, Israel, Russia, China. And I thought about what the impact of that would be. And the numbers are so large, I had to stop thinking about it. And I just prayed. I prayed we do the right thing. But we still have a little bit to fight for. For example, if you think my 92-year-old Uncle Ralph, who's not with us, I have a funny feeling he's going to, if you would have said to Ralph, honey, you can't mail in your vote anymore, and you got to go sit in 100 and walk in 110 degrees and in some line and vote, the Italian foul language that would have come out of his mouth. And I was talking to a friend of mine and who said, what was the phrase? We have earned a lot. We are a free country. And I want to start out by saying that, Mark.
Yeah.
We have rights that allow you and I to have this conversation today.
Yes.
We have rights. We even have rights that if we wanted to bring a news clip into the show and analyze it, we could do it without copyright infringement. And there are places all over the world. You know, Max Schmeling and Joe Louis. Max Schmeling from World War II, Germany. Hitler loved him. Not so sure he felt the same way. But when he lost the fight, so this is what I mean. When he lost the fight, the flip of a switch, a word from Adolf Hitler, turned every television, every broadcast of the end of the fight off. Can you imagine?
Oh, yeah.
We don't live
I
in that country. So 250 years to hold true to what we fought for is worth celebrating.
I agree. And you just brought up a really fascinating point. Oh, and for the listeners, this is a call-in show, 1-800-930-2819. So we are here. We will take your calls. One of the things I've learned, Dr. Pat, in traveling around the world is what makes the United States different. It's one of very few countries which has, it's not so much freedom of speech. What separates the United States is freedom after you make the speech. You can get up in Red Square or in Moscow or Tiananmen Square in Beijing or wherever you want in Tehran and say anything you want. But if you do, it's almost a foregone conclusion that there's going to be a knock on the door at 3 a.m. and you're going to disappear. And, you know, freedom after the speech. And I know that there's a lot of people right now that feel that the separation of powers and all of this is being tested. And that's why that brave group of very flawed but incredibly intelligent men, the founding fathers, that's why they created separation of powers. That's why they created the First Amendment that gave us our Bill of Rights, which include freedom of assembly, of the press, of speech, of freedom of and from religion. It is just amazing. Freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures, freedom, or right to an attorney, right against self-incrimination. I mean, this is really radical stuff. And as a student of history, a lot of historians look at this as, is it a coincidence that that many incredibly gifted and intelligent men found themselves in the same room in Philadelphia to hammer this out? I mean, what other country in the world 250 years ago had anywhere near the type of freedoms that they envisioned? Now, granted, a number of our founding fathers, including George Washington, owned slaves. But I saw something, a quote from Barack Obama. And Barack Obama said, I can reconcile the fact that I can admire George Washington and still acknowledge the fact that he owned slaves. And I think that's just absolutely brilliant because, you know, Jefferson knew owning slaves was wrong. He spent a lot of time in France, and there was a number of discussions he had with people, and this was a huge philosophical and moral dilemma that he was going through, but he was also a child of his times. Now, I am not for 1 nanosecond justifying slavery. Okay, it is the most abominable affront to humanity, but that was the world these people lived in. Now, they created not only the Declaration of Independence, but eventually the Constitution, which evolved and grew, and the concept of freedom. Women in the United States did not earn, and I hate that. In other words, men didn't condescend to grant them the right to vote until 1920. Seriously?
But you know, Mark, this is why we're doing this show today. And one of the reasons that gets me super excited about it is in the subline of what I wrote, I asked the question, have we moved forward or are we taking step backs? Now, I don't answer that because I asked myself, but I had a friend that made me laugh hilarious the other day. Now, it's not a funny topic, but sometimes as US citizens, we could laugh at ourselves. And my friend said to me, girlfriend, get ready to pack your bags. And which country do you think you're going back to, Brazil or Italy? And I said, what are you talking about? Because as busy as I am, I did not know. And one of the pleas I want to make for people today, not just of my generation or your generation, but of the young generation, and not the youngest generations, but all of them, millennials, all across the board. It's not about what we fought for or what you will lose. It's about what you don't know that you've lost, and you've already lost it. And, so my friend was joking. She had this list of people and she was hilarious. She said, Arnold Schwarzenegger is going to come on and he's going to have to say, I will not be back. And I'm like, dude, I never thought about it this way. You see, we have to stay on the pulse. We don't have to become the heart. If you want to become the heart, then you fasten your seatbelt as J-Lo gets deported. But you understand what we're saying here. Celebrate the 250 years, but we need to fight for the next 250.
Right.
It's not over.
Well, yes. And it's important to note that things have changed. The Civil Rights Voting Act of 1964, after white people, white men, condescended to grant people of color who were descendants or were African in origin or descendants of African people, condescended to quote unquote free them. It still took until 1964 for the Voting Rights Act to come into law. But as much as we can crash on our forebears, we have to look at where are we now. And things
Yes.
have changed, right? We had Barack Obama as president. I think that was great. We've had several African Americans and women in positions of power and responsibility in government and in major cabinet positions, certainly in the media. I mean, Oprah Winfrey has just been a major force for change and for positivity, and I see it continuing. And we may make some steps forward, there may be some steps back, but it is an ongoing process. So what will the next 250 years take us? I'm hoping it'll just get to the point where gender isn't an issue when it comes to a question of leadership. It comes to a question of who is the best person for the job. And that's the way it should be. But what it should be and what it is still an evolving process. Let me throw in one more 2 cents worth. For people who don't quite get the struggle that women have gone through, there was a series, it was an HBO series called Mad Men. And Mad Men, that was the nickname for Madison Avenue advertising men. And it took place in like 1959 through 1964. And it was fascinating because here we are on Madison Avenue with the top, advertising executives, and it shows how women were objectified, marginalized, shoved off to the side, but nonetheless, the women began to emerge as a power and a force in a very, very male-dominated world. So aside from the fact that there's a lot of good acting and it's a bit of a soap opera, but it still reflects the times, and it shows like where our parents, where grandparents were, and where we are today. There was a time when it was okay for a male executive to come in and grab a secretary, a female secretary on the fanny and go, hey, sweetie, get me a cup of coffee. All right, if you did that now, aside from possibly getting the hot coffee thrown in your face, you're going to get sued and brought before HR department and all those things, which you should. But the thing is, that really wasn't that long ago. But things
No.
changed. but things have changed, and they are continuing to change, and that's a positive. That's a very positive step, I think.
But you know, I look at this and I look at everything because, Mark, for me, it's personal, and it's hard for me for it not to be personal. I happen to be born of a mom, and you've heard me talk about my mom, you know, first
Yeah.
child at 12, second at 13. And, you know, I don't know what got into her soul. I don't know, but she dragged us kids out on the streets in New York, the Bronx. We started in the Bronx. There was something she did not like in the Bronx. I don't know what that was to this day, but she dragged us three girls and had us all dressed up in these crinoline dress. I mean, it was just ridiculous, with her beautiful nails, and dragged us out to be marching in the street with a bunch of people that didn't look like us. And that went on. It continued. And later on in life, when my dad died, I got to sit down with her and I asked her about that, because that's why I became who I am, right? I got to ask her about that. And she talked about growing up in the Deep South and what she saw.
Yes.
She talked about that. And she talked about it graphically.
Yes.
What she saw. And she talked about how she felt, what's the word, helpless, as a young white woman in the South with two children, as she watched people being hung, beaten. And it made sense to me.
Yeah.
It made sense to me. And now my mom never forgot this, by the way. This is who she was. This is who she continued to be. But I'm not sure how she kept her sanity through it and her optimism, because she did. But she always saw something. And the only fight I ever saw my mom and dad have, Mama Doris and Dad, Tony, was during the Kennedy-Nixon election. The only time that ever came to the table, she won. She won the argument. She won the case. And then threatened my dad that if you don't shut up, you're going to get locked out of the bedroom. So that's just one other thing I want to say. But it's still fight. It's fighting, not in the words fighting. We're not picking up a gun. But when we start to not speak out for what we believe in, the gay man that was tied up on barbed wire and beaten to death, right?
Matthew Shepard. I
Matthew
remember
Shepard.
that. Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, his whole crime being he existed.
Yep.
Yeah.
When the NBA almost didn't support Magic Johnson, took them 3 months, and they showed extraordinary leadership, the NBA. And if it wasn't for that, Magic Johnson wouldn't have gone on to educate the world. See, we live in a country where anything is possible.
Yes.
That's worth celebrating.
Yes, it is. And I've been a patriot, and people always say, "Oh, you're so patriotic." Well, I've traveled the world. I've been to military dictatorships. I've been to monarchies. I've been to third world nations. I mean, I know I've been through Europe. I mean, Europe, we can relate to the Europeans, but I'll tell you one thing. When I was at Oxford and we were studying comparative civil liberties, the Europeans have the legal apparatus to shut off free speech a lot quicker than in the United States. France in particular, and they do it and they couch it and they like, if there's a national security issue or there's a problem, they can cut off your speech. But for the most part, the Europeans are democracies. But what people also need to realize is innocent until proven guilty. Whoa! All right, that is a cornerstone of the United States legal system. And as a former prosecutor and as a former criminal defense attorney, that's huge, because in Europe, with the exception of Great Britain, because we follow Anglo-American jurisprudence, if you're arrested for a crime, it is not the state which must prove your guilt. It is the defendant, you who've been arrested, that must prove your innocence. All right. So America is the great experiment in democracy, and experiments, sometimes there's failures, so you got to go back and reassemble things and keep going. And this is worth celebrating. The United States, for all of its flaws, is may be one of the greatest civilizations that this planet has ever produced. Now, once again, we are not perfect. We have a lot of flaws. But if we stick to the principles enshrined first in the Declaration of Independence, but even more so in the Constitution of the United States, we stand a pretty darn good chance of realizing a true democracy, what that fight for freedom is. And because of what the founders developed and implemented, we're also legally entitled to, it's our right to continue that fight, that struggle for freedom.
But isn't that why we're talking about this today? I mean, both of us, I don't know about you, but I can talk about me. I understand what it's like to be discriminated against as a woman, especially in corporate America. I also understand what it's like to see what happens when leadership emerges. I work for extraordinary supervisors who fought for me, managers who fought for me, white managers, women managers, and managers of color. And what if it wasn't for them to really risk their jobs, their careers, things would be different, And I thought about them because I was writing this paper. I had to really think about the heroes. And let's talk about the heroes for a minute, if we could, because we don't talk about our heroes enough. Now, we make movies about them, which I don't know if half of the movies are true or not. But you have studied history. We have heroes. Maya Angelou wrote a poem. I don't have it in front of me, but I watched the documentary on Joe Louis the other day. And it was so well done. His story, his journey, Max Schmeling. But Maya Angelou wrote a poem as he was fighting and boxing. And at boxing Schmeling. And she wrote this poem as the thing was unfolding. What if he fought? I mean, do we need to say any more about Maya Angelou at all? Oh my gosh,
Right.
are you
Yeah.
kidding me?
She's one of the great poets of all time, really.
But all of the people that have come before, both men and women, all that have come before, we forget what it was like to not even be able to walk in front of a man, or a person of color not to use a bathroom.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying those are things that we have to keep fighting for, although I have to say I'm not really sure. But we have to keep our eye on the ball, don't we?
We do. And so many people say, if only we had a female president. Well, I'm going to reveal a bit of history that they don't necessarily teach in school. And I really hate the way history is being edited, but that's another topic. Our World War I president, Woodrow Wilson, came up with 14 points at the end of World War I and pushed for the League of Nations. But then when he got back to the United States, his health started declining really, really badly, and he lapsed into what appears to have been a coma. And his cabinet members would go to the residence of the White House, and First Lady Edith Wilson would come out and say, I'll take these papers, these documents, and I'll see that the president gets them. Well, the truth is, Woodrow Wilson was in a non-responsive state. He was dying, and First Lady Edith Wilson was signing his signature on these documents. She was reviewing things. So, in effect, she was running the country. So, ladies, we have had a female president, and that was Edith Wilson. So, I got to give kudos to her. And yes, she was forging documents and all that, but she was not some, trophy wife sitting in the background. She was always there by his side. She was a great partner. She was extremely intelligent. And she knew that she had to take up the slack until her
Wow.
husband's health got to the point where, the vice president had to take over. But Edith Wilson was, for all intensive purposes, our first female president.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Ah, I'm speechless.
Yeah. That was part of the keynote presentation I gave to the Society for Scientific Exploration in Denver last week. What an amazing organization. If any of the members are listening, thank you for having me. It was an honor to be there. But when you start uncovering history, it's so funny the way women have been shoved to the background, but even so, women have always found a way to shine. And how could you not? You're half the population of the world. You give birth to all of the population of the world. I mean, it's just ridiculous that women have not had a more prominent role in Western and in global society. I mean, still, like, there's countries where women have, they got to wear these veils and things and all this and be relegated to second class status. It's like, look, the Iron Age has been over for a long time. It's time for all of us to leave that in the rear view.
Yeah. I realized how out of the loop I have been in some ways until I started to get these emails from my friends and text messages. But the one that I got from my friend woke me up. And it wasn't recently. It had to be a month ago, or I don't know, whenever the whole Citizen Act thing went to the lower courts. And my friend sent me a short text, and it said, "Say goodbye to Kamala Harris." I was like, where's she going? Like vacation? Like what? And she said, say goodbye. Her answer was say goodbye to Kamala Harris. And I picked up the phone and I said, okay, no more texts. Where's Kamala Harris going? She says she is the only political figure that would lose citizenship.
Oh.
Now, I was like, what? So I'm Googling it and I'm trying to find somebody else, and everybody else has got a loophole around it, right? Marco Rubio has a loophole around it. Right? So they have loopholes, but Kamala does not. And it was so interesting because I thought, no, that can't be true. It can't be true. None of us knew that. None of us understood the impact of something that was happening. Because you see, you can't fight for freedom, Mark, if you don't know that there's a fight to be had.
Right. Oh, we have a question. Does Dr. Pat have any, logical insight into the Pluto return and how that relate to the 250th birthday? Okay, Dr. Pat, this is a good one for you.
Now,
all right.
Now, wait. Here's my insight. I'm so glad you asked, because the first thing we have to talk about is the moon in Capricorn, which is going to be in the shadow of this. So that's one of the first things. And, so let's talk about that. Planets by themselves are not, it's hard to talk about them. And can I make the caveat? It's not like, what do they call it? Sidestepping. That's not what I'm doing. But thank you for the question. And yes. And let's talk about our 250th birthday. Now, some people will argue it wasn't on the date that it was on. But Mark, that's up to you to handle that question.
Yeah, I'll take care of that. Want me to do that real quick? Can we get to you?
Yeah, take care of that one. Because that changes everything.
The Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson drafted it. He had the very input of John Adams and Benjamin Franklin. Okay, so we had three geniuses working on it. He submitted it to the Continental Congress in Philadelphia on July 4th of 1776, and they approved it. So, boom. It was approved. It wasn't officially signed. Everybody didn't sign it until August 2nd, 1776. But as the Declaration of Independence, it was a viable document that day. That's why July 4th is Independence Day. And you got to realize this was 1776, the horse and buggy era. Things moved slower back then. Okay, nowadays it would all be like e-signed and all done in about 15 seconds. Things took time, but all the delegates signed it. And there was a lot of wheeling and dealing going on behind the scenes to make sure everybody was on board with it, because they knew this was a declaration of war against the British Empire, which is the most formidable military power in the world. All right, Dr. Pat, back to you.
Yes. So let me answer the astrology question, because it's a great question. And, you know, there are many people that have looked at it. But there are a couple of things I want to talk about related to this. Clearly, when Pluto returns, right, the energy of this is about the nation and this is about the nation continuing to try to navigate the aftershocks, right, of Pluto return. Aftershocks, Pluto. I mean, there are aftershocks, right? Now, unfortunately for Pluto, there have been a lot of, it's a planet, it's a this, it's not, it doesn't matter. From an astrology point of view, it's always been important, right? But it is associated, Mark, with dismantling, right? It's associated with dismantling and transformation of institutions and financial systems. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, how that unfolds is not independent. You have to look at Mars and Uranus in Gemini. You have to at least stop and look at that for a minute, you know, because they're just minutes into the 4th of July. So will something happen on the 4th? Well, some of these astrologers take a look at the transit that goes on, the breakthroughs, the unexpected shifts. Hello, the Supreme Court vote was a complete, like it's happening in the scope of things, right? Unexpected shift, you know, those majority votes, people that voted on it, right? And now the backlash. So let's talk about what they talk about in Pluto, aftershocks, right? Here's one of them. It's what Mark said. It's not speaking for freedom, but the aftermath that the justices, supposed justices that were handpicked, are getting now on the news channels, right? I'm not going to mention what their names are, but I think even Megyn Kelly came out and just, the people are in shock. But don't be in shock, because Pluto, this is where you have to navigate the aftershocks. And that was an aftershock. So what do we do with aftershocks? One, we don't know when they're going to stop. If I went to school in California, folks, I will tell you, aftershock, you think they're never going to end. They just like, what is that going on? After a while, you become normalized to aftershocks. So that's what I want to say. The second thing is you got this mid-July thing that's going to happen. So yes, we're celebrating 250 years and it's a threshold. And this Mars-Uranus thing in Gemini, it's about sudden breakthroughs, minutes into the 4th of July. So I can't predict this is going to happen, but Saturday, right, in this country is the 4th. Unexpected shifts, collective demand for freedom, Mark. You see what that says?
Yes.
A collective, on what level? What will it be about? What will be the collective demand for freedom be about? But that's what those planets say. Pluto, in the return of Pluto, is all about navigating. It's navigating. But the middle part of, and I'm only giving you major astrology trends. And by the way, every sign is different. My sign is different. You know, my moon is in Capricorn, and we're just going through the full moon in Capricorn now. And I'm just struck by how in tune that is for me. These are the major shifts, right? And so whoever sent that question in, if you give me your sign, I might be able to give you more information. But here's the cool thing, Mark. Astrology is not static. Every minute of the day, there's a transit, there's a move, there's an alignment, there's something. But this July 15th thing, they call it mid-July. I don't know why I'm saying July 15th. Whatever mid-July means to you. The configuration of Jupiter and to your point, Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune is historically linked to periods of political transition and social shifts. So when you take all of that together with Pluto, right? Pluto return, and you put them together with these other dynamics in the month of July, and then you throw in the year of the fire horse, use your imagination.
Well, you know, what's fascinating is July 14th is Bastille Day, which is France's version of Independence Day. That's when the people rose up against the absolute monarchy of Louis the 16th. Really sad. I love France. I love the French people. I love their culture. But I don't think it was necessary to put the royal family to death the way that they did, or anyway. But that's just my opinion.
You know, you go back in time too, and I was reading an article about astrology and about they call it, the article I think was called something like as time goes by. I don't know, it was something like that. It was really fascinating. And I thought it would be a real upbeat thing, but they go on and they talk about the different signs, right? They talk about the US sun, 13 in Cancer. Then there's a whole bunch of like astrology language conjoined with this, over this and this. Okay. But it goes on to talk about these themes in the declaration chart and how it supports this astrology trend supports what, oh, let me give you an example. America's love of firearms. Two of my friends that I never thought would say this say, yeah, me and my daughter, we're going to go get guns and go to the firing range. Okay. They don't mean they're going to shoot anybody, but you understand this.
Right.
Now.
They're target practicing.
This love of firearms, right? It's no longer an isolated 2% of the population or people that go out in the woods and hunt. It's not that. And then this is a great article to the caller's point. You know, they talk about, I don't know why they're focused on guns, but they're talking about the love of guns. And I have a Canadian friend who is going to get a gun and go with shooting with the daughter. And I didn't even understand that Canadians could even get guns. So you see, this is just one thing that is referencing an astrological cycle of shifts, society perspectives. Now, you make your own opinion up about guns, right? The article has a punchline. It says, forget mom and pop, forget mom and apple pie. It's firepower that Americans truly love. And he ties this all in to what he calls astrology and a national obsession. Now, some of this I read, but it's a lot of astrology, right?
Right.
But to the Pluto point, here's the Pluto point. You know, they talk about different things that Pluto has done. And they look at what has happened under Pluto. And you find that the weirdest things happen under Pluto. What would be weird? The mix-up of Oswald surname in the assassination plot was a mess up. Astrologers say that was Pluto. How does Pluto do this? I don't know. But when you look at things that happen like this, it starts to play out, Mark. You know, it starts to play. This is an energy that starts to play out. My answer is it's a tight energy. There's a constriction of sorts. And it's in contrast to the opposite that's also happening. The Supreme Court. You understand? I had to look up what happened on the, I'm sorry, this is a sidebar.
Go ahead. This is cool.
Jessica's probably going to roll her eyes. She's going to roll her eyes, right, on this. But I tried to look up the day. I don't have it in front of me, but the other day I looked up because I was shocked by something. I have been in women's sports since I hit a stickball off of a manhole in the Bronx. I have coached women's softball teams to championships. I play my own sport now, table tennis. I was one of the first people, myself and another Asian man, to fight to play together in the men's open in table tennis. Mixed doubles. We played as doubles partners, not mixed. We had to fight for that, and we won that fight. But something happened the other day, and I thought it was a typo. The 30-year commemorative WNBA poster came out, right? 30 years in this sport. And instead of Caitlin Clark representing the Indiana Fever, it was Sophie Cunningham. And Sophie Cunningham said, "What in the world am I doing on that?" And I tried to look up the planetary movement that went around that, right? What was the energies? What are people thinking? You know what I came up with? Astrology had nothing to do with it. The article I'm writing has a chapter in it called "Where Leadership Comes to Die," the WNBA. And I'm not complaining. I'm writing it from my research. I'm writing it from a philosophical, but yet factual. Please don't let time run out. But my astrology friends say we predicted it. Now, you're going to have to dig more deeply into the date that came out and what happened on that date, but the decision to do it came before that. Astrology may play a part, but we have been given, by the grace of whatever God you understand, free will. We always have choice, Mark, and I think that's where we forget.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
That's where we forget. My moon is in Capricorn, and boy, I have read the good, the bad, and the ugly about that. But I have to, I get to choose. I'm only going to read the good part today.
Wow. You know, when people say, well, how can stars and astrology have any effect on us? Well, look at the moon. The moon governs our tides. The gravitational pull of the moon affects a lot of things. Talk to any police officer, first responder, people that work in mental health, and the term lunatic, okay, comes from moon. On a full moon, Dr. Pat, you're a psychologist, there's more arrests, people get more agitated, more babies are born on a full moon. Then in 1916, Albert Einstein theorized that there's this force called gravitational waves, and that gravitational waves can come to Earth, and that's when two black holes collide. Long story short, in 2016, 100 years afterwards, the LIGO, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Observatory, detected gravitational waves and tracked them to these two black holes like thousands of light years away. It took thousands of years to get here, but those gravitational waves did affect us. So, if something from 1,000 light years away can emit an energy that influences life on Earth, and if the moon, which is only 250,000 miles away, can influence our tides, and not just our tides, but what's going on within our bodies, why can't the planets in our solar system, the stars, have some type of impact? Now, I'm not saying that they do, but they do. Do they have it in the way that we expect they do? We're still not sure. And I guess this is also leading me to July 2nd is World UFO Day. And right now, the Trump administration is releasing all these UFO files. I've been looking through them. I'm doing a lot of research for a project I've got going on. I've worked extensively with MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, and people who have claimed to be abductees, alien abductees. And Steven Spielberg recently released his movie Disclosure Day. Interesting movie to me, and I'm not one to criticize Steven Spielberg because he is, an icon. I would have preferred it to have been like a 5-part miniseries only because there was so much going on in the movie. I was able to follow it only because I study all this stuff. Because the
Mhm.
friends that I went with were like, "What was that?" You know, and I was sitting there explaining the nuances and things that if you weren't into all this. Long story short, we live in very exciting times. The fight for freedom of information is another aspect of freedom. People have been fighting for release of government documentation on UFOs for a long time. And it's not just the United States. Mexico, Great Britain, Russia, China, other countries around the world have massive amounts of information on UAPs, unexplained anomalous phenomenon, formerly known as UFOs, unidentified flying object. The question is, are we alone in the universe? The evidence indicates otherwise. And that's, we're talking about astronomy and astrology. So there are planets and star systems that emit gravitational waves which affect life on Earth. And maybe a lot of those stars have planets with intelligent beings on them that are popping by to visit. So,
I am
go ahead.
extremely sure of that because I watched the movie Project Hail Mary. I'm so
Yeah,
convinced.
yeah,
Yeah, there's no, I'm just,
yeah.
but but to your point, this is what I was talking about with Pluto. See, to the caller's point, Pluto, when this Pluto ingressed into Aquarius in the spring, that's when it started. That's leaving Caitlin Clark off with the commemorative. But it's interesting when you read about astrology and the women's basketball league, how they're intertwined. Because remember what I said, shakeups. Everybody thinks a shakeup has to be in government. It doesn't. It's an awareness, Mark.
Yeah.
And how does something that was so benign 3 years ago, yes, people, the WNBA, so benign, now is being talked about by other countries over one event involving Caitlin Clark, because that one event opened up a can of worms. See, that's what Pluto does.
Right.
Now we have the aftershock. So in our personal lives, we have to be aware of how we're responding to a situation or an event, just like you described. Who would have thought we would be living in an administration that so supported releasing?
Yeah, that's what's so fascinating about the Trump administration. I'll give the Trump administration this. They do shake things up a lot. And the question is, though, are we getting everything from these UFO files? And I'm not a conspiracy theorist because I was going through them and everything is like, well, UAPs are real, but we don't know what they are, and we can't say they're proof of extraterrestrials. It's like, well, then what is it? They say, well, it could be Russia or China. Okay, look, we've got our F-18s. We've got the fastest fighter jets, the best fighter jets in the world, and the pilots are saying these things are doing stuff we can't. Okay, there's footage of a UFO, UAP zooming along off Virginia Beach, and then it hits the water. They're going underwater. Okay, our jets don't do that, or maybe if they do, it's classified. But the thing is, there is some type of technology. Now, on the flip side of the coin, not everything that's reported as a UAP or UFO, I mean, I use the term interchangeably, is. Some things can be explained through natural phenomenon or a mistaking of a drone or a weather balloon. I mean, that was the official story at Roswell. Give me a break. But the thing is, there is a large number that cannot be explained, or at least the government's not explaining that. But I will give the Trump administration credit. They are releasing these files, and it is pretty darn interesting. So everybody out there,
I have two things to say.
check it out. Go to the government website on this. Go ahead, Dr.
Yeah.
Pat.
My intuition is, because I heard the original release from Trump, his original statement, I don't know when. I believe if it was up to President Trump, Donald Trump, everything would be released. It's not, I think the administration, these people that have locked the doors and held on to this for so long are so threatened by not being the only one having it. I think that's it. But you know what you described? You described a wart. You know when you get a wart on your body Okay, you can explain a wart in two ways. You go to the doctor and the doctor will give you, this is a wart. It is a biological thing that is happening on your body and da, 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 da. Or you grow up believing I got too dang close to a frog. And as kids, you believe that until somebody tells you different. So you either believe it's a wart, a UFO, or something else. But in the end, there's a way too much evidence now. I don't care.
Yeah,
what
there
I
is.
mean,
I've worked with so many people in the UFO field, and also, I mean, come on, at a conservative estimate, in our galaxy, there's over 200 billion stars, and between Hubble Space Telescope and the Webb Telescope, each star has planets around them. Even if we're dealing with 0.0000001%, we're still talking about millions of planets that can support life. And so the very thought that we are alone in the universe, and I will quote, paraphrase from Disclosure Day. There's a Catholic nun who's asked by a novitiate who is grappling with her faith, but doesn't the Bible say that we're the only people on earth? And the Mother Superior said, Earth is basically only part of creation. Earth was given as a dominion to people. She said, why would God be limited
yep.
and who create something so vast just be limited to this one planet? And I went and I looked up the Genesis quote, and I see how it can be interpreted that way. So thank you, Steven Spielberg. And for all the people who say, we're the only life in the universe, perhaps you need to really take a look at the document that you're so quick to quote, because it can be interpreted in many ways. So the Psychic and the Doc, we are here every week for you. And I know a lot of people are on vacation because generally, you know, we have callers, and that's okay because sometimes these discussions are every bit as important. But we are here for you. We will be back next week and the week after. And everyone, have a happy and safe 4th of July. Don't get behind the wheel of a car if you've been drinking. Call a taxi, an Uber, a Lyft. Okay, enjoy the 4th. Don't hurt yourself. And remember, keep looking at the sky, not just the fireworks, but there may be somebody else watching you.
And more next week for our call. I will bring more next week on Pluto and what the 15th will be about.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Psychic and the Doc with Mark Anthony and me, Dr. Pat Baccili, right here on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Hey, look, come back next week so we can explore with you more of life's many challenges and learn from fascinating guests. And you know what? Even Mark and me. We'll connect you and discover insights from people in this life and from the afterlife. Extraordinary problems? Yeah, they do. They require extraordinary solutions. But step into the world of possibilities with us on the Psychic and the Doc. That's every Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on TransformationTalkRadio.com. That's TransformationTalkRadio.com. And don't forget, we're also live face-to-face on Facebook.com, Transformation Talk Radio.